Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Indira, and today I'm here with Becky Briggs. If you haven't already checked out the past episode we've done with Becky, then absolutely do that. Becky's been through a lot. She's a classic example of how, with the right mental attitude, the right actions, and enough willpower, anything can be overcome and success and happiness can be found on the other side. In this episode, we catch up with Becky, GB marathon runner, online run coach, and entrepreneur. In this episode, Becky shares what she's been up to over the past year, how it's been back on the start line of the marathons, running 3 marathons, her training, thoughts for the future, and reflections in general. Lots to learn from in this, and also, comment down below your estimate on how many laps of Battersea Park Becky will be running in 2025. There'll be a shout out if anyone gets right in 2026. Okay, as always, if you've been enjoying the show, please be sure to give it a rating and share it with someone who might benefit too. This helps give credibility to the podcast and helps connect listeners to episodes that can offer them value too. Okay, let's get into the episode. Hi, Becky. Thanks for rejoining. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Really, really good. Like it's a super rainy day here today, but yeah, it's January, so can't complain.
Yeah, there was meant to be some sort of amber warnings for snow and all sorts. So
Yeah, I feel like to be fair, here was like a really lucky escape because like not to be like a snow Scrooge or anything, but I feel like at this age it just makes things hard work, doesn't it?
yeah. Oh yeah. I was trudging down the canal this morning and all the slush, and you're just like, oh, this is in my way. Get out the way. Okay, brilliant. And so just to bring anyone up to speed, if you haven't already listened to Becky's past episode, highly would recommend doing that. Just, scroll back a bit, check it out. But we did last speak in October 2023. Actually, it was the summer, so maybe a little bit before. So yeah, it's been over a year and a bit. Can you talk us through, where are you currently at?
Yeah, so I'm currently I've just started with a new coach. I've just come off the back of Valencia Marathon, which felt like it was a big breakthrough. Definitely like a big breakthrough on kind of like getting back towards my best, which was really, really nice. Um, yeah, I'm kind of continuing like my full-time job is online coaching, which is absolutely amazing. So very rewarding, based in London. And yeah, then do like bits of content creation and things on the side.
Amazing. So everything's going well, and that's really, really great to hear. And I guess so for you, for anyone, maybe who hasn't had a chance to listen to that past episode already, can you give us maybe a brief summary of kind of your past history with running, what the journey to sort of this point has been like?
For sure. So I'll try and kind of do this like as brief as possible. So I've been running for a very, very long time. Since I was like 9 years old, started off with the very classic kind of like schools cross country and then, moving on to the track. Very quickly my relationship with running became very kind of like complex and was kind of entangled with, eating disorders and just poor mental health in general and just essentially I was struggling a lot in those kind of early years of secondary school. So that would have been like 12, 13, which ended up me being in an inpatient unit and then, working really hard to kind of get out of that inpatient unit and then had an up and down sort of 5 years following, whereas kind of, definitely in a much better position, but wasn't sort of fully out of the kind of like, constraints of like how much an eating disorder and those types of thoughts can have a hold on you. And then when I sort of hit 17, I actually went to a physio appointment with my local physio, who is now currently my coach. So we've done a bit of a full circle. But I went to see him, and he just kind of like told me some not home truths, but he was the first person to ask me what I actually wanted out of running. And he also just kind of said, without any muscle mass, you can't expect to get any faster. And that was like a switch that flicked in my head. And I just thought, like, what am I doing? Eat properly, train properly, and see what you can do in this sport. So I did that, and then very quickly kind of, saw the improvements. and got my first England vest, and then my first GB vest at World Cross, and that kind of like continued. I went off to St Mary's University in September 2019, and then kind of like continued my running there. I went to the World Half Marathon Championships, and then in 2021 I did my first ever marathon, which was at Kew Gardens, and then I kind of got the marathon bug type of thing, and then kind of fast forward a year, I ran 2:29, which is still my marathon PB at the Manchester Marathon. I then went on to compete at Europeans, which was super exciting. But then I got two stress fractures in my back, which was, very, very frustrating. But equally, I think it was a very important kind of like learning opportunity, meaning that I had to kind of, build back from, rock bottom. If anyone knows injuries, they know that, circum stress fractures are not good. No injury's good, but they're not good. And I'd done both sides of my back. So it was a long and careful journey to get back to, running at that kind of like, elite level. I stepped back on the start line of a marathon in April 2024 for London Marathon, which was kind of like a big, yeah, kind of like a big stepping stone, because just to kind of have that confidence to be like, no, I am going to do this was really, really important for me. Did that, ran 2:35, and then went on to run 2:32 in Valencia, which is December just gone. And yeah, that's kind of like a very, very quick rundown. I hope that all sort of makes sense. But that's like a very, very quick rundown of my 15, 16 years in running.
Yeah, no, very concise, very well done. I think hopefully everyone's got a bit of a picture. But yeah, you definitely are someone who's been through quite a lot of what there is to go through in terms of running, and really successfully come out the other side and kind of shown that that full recovery really is possible, which is, really, really great. And I guess then if we maybe talk about, this season, you've kind of got back on it with the marathons after, a bit of fallout from, like you say, the double stress fractures and stuff. Do you want to walk us through what the journey to that point's kind of been like, and maybe how it's been this past year, having those marathons again back in your life, and also just, fitting in three in a year?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So London Marathon was definitely like, it was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to do that comeback at London Marathon, and I knew that I wasn't sort of like in peak fitness type of thing, but equally I didn't want to be scared of like standing back on that start line and, putting myself out there, because I'm not doing this for anyone else apart from myself type of thing. So, I just wanted to be like, right, okay, go and do it, prove to myself that I have still got like a space in this kind of like, British elite marathon running type of thing. I might not be right at my best right now, but I still deserve to be here type of thing. And I do feel like, that's exactly what I did. It wasn't like an absolute A-star performance. I didn't kind of finish it and think, wow, I've just had an incredible run. It was hard, and kind of like the time off with the stress fractures, and just that kind of like interruption in training definitely showed in that final 10k. Like, it was really, really hard, don't get me wrong. Like, it's such a battle. um it was really, really hard, but it was definitely kind of like, I finished and I thought, yeah, okay, like that's a stepping stone. Like, I've not gone anywhere, she's still there inside. I can get back to being like good at this again. So yes, that was London Marathon, which was really nice, and really nice to do. It was so much support from like so many people, like online and in person. Like, the crowds are incredible. When you're running as an elite female at London, it's really lonely. Like, you are running completely on your own for the majority of it. I was lucky enough to have Clara pacing me towards like 32k, but then that last 10k just feels like an absolute lifetime. But the support from everybody else around me was incredible. So, that's like a huge thank you to the whole running community, because that was absolutely incredible. But yeah, that was London Marathon. And then after that, I was kind of like, right, I want to do Valencia. I think the really nice thing with marathon running is that it's not just like, whereas like 5,000 on the track, for instance, you could kind of do it anywhere, and a track's a track. Obviously, there's some tracks in beautiful locations, don't get me wrong, but a track's a track. Whereas with marathons, like there are these big ones that you want to tick off, and ones that you hear good rep about. And Valencia was definitely one of those. Like it looked amazing the year before, and I was like, I want to give that a go. Like it's fast, it's flat, and it's a good time of year. So yeah, that was the plan. And yeah, summer was a little bit sort of up and down. I ended up with really bad plantar fasciitis, which I think was just a combination of all sorts of different things. A large one actually being the transition of moving. So I spent 5 years living in Teddington and doing all of my runs in Bushy and Richmond. And I didn't quite realise how much the kind of difference from running on those like trail surfaces, that like compact trail, to doing everything in Battersea Park and it just being like concrete road. It couldn't be any more of a road surface than, I didn't quite realize how much impact that would have on my body. And I think that was a obviously there's loads of different things, but the timing of it, that seemed to be the biggest factor towards the plantar fasciitis, which if anyone's had plantar fasciitis, they know that it's just a really annoying injury to have, because you can run on it and it's not like rest just sort of solves it, but it hurts and it's the rehab. But yeah, so that was an annoying few months, but I luckily managed to kind of get through it. And then by the time I got sort of like into the middle of the marathon block for Valencia, I was being able to run, pain free. It wasn't impacting me, which made things a lot more pleasant. Let's put it that way. So yeah, then that took me to Valencia Marathon, where I ran 2:32. I was really unconfident ahead of that. Like I. I don't think I've ever been so unconfident about my own running, but I was. But it sort of got to race week, and I just thought, well, you've just got to give it your absolute best go, and that's exactly what I did. And I'm really, really proud of that result. Like I think 2:32 was a very strong performance for the training that I'd done, and yeah, I'm proud of how I ran it and executed it. And yeah, it was good, and even managed to do a sprint finish as well, which was fab.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, after that many kilometers, yeah, that's another level of impressive. And yeah, just to kind of put it into real terms as well, 2:32 marathon is 3:37 per kilometer for 42.5 kilometers.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. So definitely some pace there for sure. And okay, let's unpack what's kind of gone on then. So first things first, let's kind of talk around that experience of running as an elite female athlete. It is, I suppose, a bit unique in that there's
Mhm.
not that many women around. And
Yes.
how does that process even work? How's it kind of integrated with the regular marathon? And why do you think the field's so sort of strung out?
For sure. So I think the thing is, so I've only ever really ran as an elite female in London Marathon, which I've done twice now, and both very similar experiences of, you have like the international athletes who are significantly quicker, and then you maybe have a couple of the top British athletes who are kind of like going for that sub 2:30 mark. And then you have sort of a couple of other British athletes who maybe not quite sure what shape they're in. For instance, both the times that I ran London Marathon, I was like, on a good day, it could be this, on a bad day, it could be this. You don't know, anything can happen. And everyone just ends up sort of running on their own. It's a difficult one because I don't fully understand, but I know that sometimes for records and qualifications for things that would be, aren't really things that are where I am at the moment, you have to be in like a female only race with female only pacers type of thing. And I think that that's a big reason of it. But for myself, when you're kind of like around that 2:30 mark, or low 2:30s, just under 2:30, that doesn't really matter. It's not really relevant. So to be honest, it just feels really lonely. And it's amazing because everyone's sort of cheering you on. But I think from a performance perspective, after having done Valencia, where there's so many men around you running similar times, it's not something that I would choose to do if I wanted to run the quickest time that I could on that day. I think that it's an amazing experience, and I'm not saying that I won't ever run London Marathon as an elite female again, because it's so special. But I think if you're wanting to run a really quick marathon as an elite British female, it might not be the one or the place to do it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that you can't, but I think for me, every athlete is so different. But in Valencia, just having so many men around you, that like it's that last bit, that last 10K, when your effort is still the same, but if you're on your own, it's so easy for the pace just to slip back. But if there's other people running the same pace as you, it's so much easier just to kind of keep going at that pace or slip off a lot less, which I definitely found in Valencia. So yeah, that's pretty much the experience as a London Marathon Elite summed up. It's sort of like amazing. You're running across Tower Bridge on your own. Everyone's cheering for you, and you know that they're cheering for you. But performance-wise, I think it's actually easier to run as championship.
Oh yeah, no, okay, that makes so much sense. And yeah, 100% definitely, when you've got something that long to kind of be, especially on those last 10 kilometers. Yeah. And I guess then with Valencia, were you running not as an elite, or is it that they combine the elites in that marathon?
For sure. So Valencia is completely combined female male. So there's no sort of like the female elites don't set off half an hour before the men type of thing. So everyone's together, which I actually think is really fab. Like, yeah, there's not going to be as much sort of like camera time on the females, but as an athlete, I don't know whether people really are that bothered. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm not sure. You're just trying to run quick. Um so yeah, but so I was like a sub elite or an elite B in Valencia, which meant that I could go and put my stuff in. It was essentially like a big kind of empty car park beforehand, and had somewhere to warm up. And then we were kind of like ushered out to the start, like with all the elites. Everyone was sort of together and just stood just a little bit back from them. Didn't have drinks bottles, so it was gels. So that was the only difference really. It sorted my own accommodation and travel, but like that's absolutely fine, wouldn't expect anything different. But the only real difference was carrying your gels rather than having drinks.
Okay. Yeah, no, now that makes sense. And so in terms of those kind of, especially those last 10 and quite solo experience at London, what was going through your mind during those last 10 kilometers, and how are you kind of motivating yourself through that race if you want to go
For
back there?
sure. For sure. So it's one of those things where, and this has happened both the times that I've done London Marathon, where that last 10K, I think because you are on your own, and that last 10K of the London Marathon course is sort of notoriously quite hard. On paper, it shouldn't be particularly hard, but it is when you're running it. Like, there's something about it that it feels quite hard. Um, it was just to keep going, because you kind of get to the point where looking at your watch and seeing what pace I was running at wasn't going to make me run any faster or slower. It's just a case of doing everything you can just to keep going, not let anything seize up, don't do anything silly in terms of drastic, pushing on of pace, take on your fuel and just put one foot in front of the other. Yeah, I think a big part of the marathon is, really from getting from A to B as fast as you possibly can. So sometimes in that last 10K, you're literally just doing everything you can just to kind of like get to that finish line in the best place possible. And, you very much are aware that, at any point something might cramp, or, whether it's a quad or a hamstring or a calf, you've been running for such a long time that you've kind of got to like just keep just kind of keep being very rational and just keep being like relaxed and calm, and tell yourself that you're okay, like you might not feel fab but you're all right, and just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, quick, you're okay to yourself, regardless of how things are feeling. No, that's great. And in terms of, I guess, then maybe let's call it the pain journey of a marathon. I'd assume if you're holding this pace for 40 odd kilometers, does it feel kind of comfortable at the start, or is it kind of a slow burn, or what's the kind of, how does it feel physically?
For sure. So I think it's a really interesting one. And of course, like I work as, an online coach, coaching athletes from their very first marathon to, people who are running, like in the 2:30s type of thing. So see the full scope of it. And I think that there's a lot of kind of like sayings of like, the first half of a marathon should feel easy, and then it gets hard. But the quicker you go with the marathon, you know, that marathon pace isn't necessarily going to be comfortable. If I'm told to go and run, like 5K and my marathon pace, like I'm still having to put in a good effort. Like it's still, it's tempo pace, which it doesn't feel comfortable type of thing. So yeah, it's a strange one where like you just never really feel great. You're sort of like, you don't feel awful, but you don't feel good. And I think that that is a big part about the marathon, is being able to bear something that's like not comfortable for a really long time, and not to kind of like give in on that kind of uncomfortableness.
Yeah. Okay. No, selling it a lot there, you won't feel awful. So it's all good. Dive straight in. Um but no, that's really interesting to hear. And yeah, definitely, that kind of pace for sure. Tempo's not particularly a walk in the park. Um so yeah, no, it's very impressive, really, just keeping that going. And you also talk about how the different courses kind of can have quite a big impact on the marathon. And certainly
Yeah.
there are these events that people are much more keen to go. Is there anything aside from maybe the way they structure the race, or, what are the kind of variables that you think make for a great marathon?
Oh, okay. So definitely in terms of like the course and it being flat, also like the weather, it is one of those things where, especially like London Marathon in April, it's on the 27th of April this coming year. The weather could be anything. Nobody knows. You need to be prepared for it being like 20 degrees, or you need to be prepared for it being sort of like 5 or 6 degrees, because you never really know at that time of year. So I think going somewhere where the climate is pretty stable, there's not going to be much wind, is a really, really important part of it. And then another big thing I think is just like logistics, which might sound silly, but it's not. The marathon's such a big toll on your body that you need to be choosing one that's in a location where it's realistic for you to maybe get there a couple of days before. Like in Valencia, I flew on the Thursday and the race was on the Sunday type of thing. And also, things are familiar in terms of like, what you're doing with your transport, your accommodation, like food. I think they're really important when it comes to the marathon, because you just need to keep everything as sort of familiar as possible and replicate, what you've been doing in training. If you go to somewhere where everything's like completely different, then how do you expect to be able to run the same? So yeah.
Yeah, so no booking a quick marathon to the desert, really, when you've been training in
Exactly.
Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting to hear. And then I guess as well, in between, or kind of building up into that marathon, that first one you did, there were a couple of halves in there. So were they sort of part of the prep for that, or
So in the lead up to London.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah, they were. Yeah, so I did one sort of around this time last year back at home, and that was nice. And then I did Bath Half as well, simply just sort of like for race practice. I think definitely after being injured, I was not nervous about getting back racing, but I'd sort of fallen out of love with it, and sort of didn't have that excitement for it. Whereas, and I felt like I needed to get that back. And I definitely sort of say that, when it comes to the marathon itself, you don't necessarily need to race in that marathon block, but equally you need to not be scared of racing. you
Mm.
know so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I think it's so individual. So for instance, in the lead up to Valencia, I didn't really do any races because that was, circumstance. Didn't do the big half because of my plantar issues at the time. So that meant that I didn't really do any races, and that was absolutely fine for me. Sometimes you simply just need to focus on the training. Whereas in the lead up to London, for instance, I did Bath Half, which is a really special one for me, because it was the last one before COVID, and it's where like my sister went to uni, and all sorts of things, and that was a really enjoyable experience. So yeah, I definitely think it's like very, very individual. But yeah, I think it's important to like feel excited for racing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, increasingly, so many people speak about that relationship between the mental and the physical, and you've
Yeah.
got to be in a good place, a happy place, a motivated place to execute, I guess, your full capability from a
Yeah.
physical perspective. And also the plantar fasciitis situation, that really is one of those injuries that is just a bit of a mare, to be honest. It drags on. It doesn't
Yeah.
really seem to have a cure, but you seem to kind of navigate that quite effectively if shot out 2 marathons afterwards. So, do you want to walk us through that process, that kind of
Sure.
recovery, how you responded?
Yeah, for sure. So it was definitely one of those things where, as soon as it sort of happened, I was, in with the team at the running room, and we were doing everything that, we could to kind of like, improve it, all of the kind of rehab strengthening exercises. But as we all know, it takes quite a chunk of time for strengthening work to sort of, kick in and like come into effect. So I was doing things like I was just avoiding any sort of like track work or intervals, avoiding any of that like real top end speed. Was being really careful with my shoe choice as well. I was finding like firmer shoes were better, avoiding any carbon shoes, things like that, just to try and kind of, make sure that I was doing everything that I could to stop it from, like worsening and, getting better type of thing. I was trying to kind of go back to Richmond and run on like some of the trails, like when I could type of thing. And the turning point really, funnily enough, was that it was definitely improving, and it was in a place where it wasn't really bothering me anymore, was maybe flaring up after a long session. But me and my best friend Juliet, we went to Portugal in October, and the trails there are quite like harsh. They're quite like ruggedy, and that just seemed to cure it. I don't know whether my foot was working extra hard. I don't know whether it was just a change of environment, a little bit less stress, no London pollution. I don't know. But then I came back and it was fine. So touch wood, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, it works. Don't question it. But
Exactly.
yeah, sometimes it can just take something a bit unexpected. I feel like, planters have a mind of their own and got to lean into whatever feels good or whatever works. But I had a
Yeah.
question kind of around that occurrence, I suppose. You've had quite a negative injury past experience or past experiences. Did that kind of trigger any sort of major concern to you? Do you feel like kind of because of the past?
It was a difficult one where, because it it kind of followed all the symptoms of like plantar fasciitis, and the reasons, no one really knows fully like the exact reason for injuries, and often it's like it's multiple things that sort of contribute to it. But because I didn't feel like it was down to something that like I'd done that was really silly, I can't. It was one of those things where I was kind of like, right, all I can do is do everything I can to, make this better. I think it was, when it sort of came on, it was like a very stressful period of time. Like I say, with the shoes, I was doing a lot of speed work because it was summer. The majority of it was on the road. That it was kind of like, well, this all makes sense. Whereas, so it was very, very different to kind of like the stress fractures. Like I didn't feel like I was kind of like to blame for it type of thing. There's no one to blame for injuries, but I feel like it wasn't anything that like I'd done that was like, oh Becky, that was a really silly decision. You deserved that. It didn't feel like that. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really good to hear. And yeah, definitely, it always helps when you kind of got a reason, or at least you know that you've done everything right that you can. And did you use Shockwave at all?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
we did do. We kind of used that in sort of like the later stages type of thing. And it's so difficult to say whether like I don't know whether it cured it or not, but like it eventually did go and has gone type of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I only say because quite a few people, I think a couple of past guests actually, have had sort of ongoing stuff with planters, and seems that Shockwave can sometimes be the magic ones. So yeah, if
Yeah,
anyone's struggling with that, may be worth a try.
yeah.
And okay, and so then, let's talk through New York. Do you want to talk us through kind of the thought process leading into that one and how that went for you?
Yeah, so New York, like for me, that was just such a special opportunity. So about 4 weeks before the New York Marathon, I got a message on Instagram from Sports Tours asking me if I'd like to, do the New York Marathon in exchange for content. And I thought to myself, I'm racing Valencia Marathon, and that's 4 weeks after New York. Is this a really silly thing to do? And I couldn't sort of like sat with the thought and was kind of like, I'm not sure type of thing. I don't want to kind of like impact Valencia negatively by, going and running New York Marathon. Um, but then I was kind of like, right, okay, I know that the longest run in my kind of marathon block is usually like around that 24 miles or that 2.5 hours at running mark, and I do it at a steady pace. So I was like, do you know what? If I run at that steady pace in New York, then I'll use it as the longest run of my training block, be sensible with it, be sensible in the week before and week afterwards, and, go and make the most of the opportunity. And I am so glad that I did it and just went, because you never know what's around the corner in your life. And, sometimes you just have to take these opportunities. And I smiled for the whole 26 miles. It was really, really special. And I think that, I felt like I was in a very privileged position to be able to go and run New York Marathon and be able to smile my entire way around. But it was incredible. I just couldn't wipe the smile off my face. The atmosphere was amazing. There were so many people sort of in that like sub 3 kind of like mark. There was so many people like running together, and it was just really special and really lovely. And like, I'd never been to America before, never been to New York, and it had always been such kind of like a bucket list dream. So I'm so glad that I went and did it. And I'd highly recommend, it's not the fastest course, it's really, really hilly, it's a hard course, but the New York Marathon is special. So definitely one like for a bucket list.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. And yeah, do you think that any of sort of the enjoyment came from the fact it was more of a training effort than a race, and so there was kind of no pressure?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to lie, when you race a marathon, like it's hard, it hurts, you have to really, really concentrate. Whereas with New York, I was like, I kind of knew in my head, I was like, I'd like to run under 3 hours, because that's where I would like this training run to be. If I was doing 24 miles back at home, that's the pace that I would be wanting to run at. So I was like, I want to run under 3 hours, but equally, like, if I need to stop at any point, that's absolutely fine. There was no pressure at all, wasn't nervous at all. I know that I can run the distance. So yeah, it definitely did factor into it, and it just allowed me to really take it in and actually look around as well, because I think a big part about of when you're racing a marathon is that you're so laser focused on the road ahead of you that you can't look around. And just seeing so many people like cheering with all their signs, it was really, really nice. So yeah.
Oh, that's so great to hear, especially when there's so much effort and pressure normally going, it's really nice to have those opportunities where you can, yeah, enjoy it and I guess gain a different kind of something from running overall. And I guess then, in terms of the content side of things, what was kind of the situation with that?
Yeah, for sure. So I was with Sports Tours, which they're a company who you can like book marathons through them, and they'll sort out like your accommodation, your like race place, and they're like super helpful in terms of kind of like organizing like activities around the marathon itself. So, shakeouts, information, kind of like briefings, after race parties type of thing. So I'd highly recommend anyone who's, wanting to do a marathon, especially one that's sort of like, overseas, like internationally, an amazing company. So, they kind of like asked me in exchange for like me running the marathon if I could kind of like create some content like on marathon day and like with their shakeout and things like that. So yeah, so that's what I did, and it was really, really nice to kind of be able to do that and be able to kind of like share and showcase, the New York Marathon type of thing. Because usually, like when I'm racing, like of course I'm not going to have my phone on me, so you can't capture the crowds or the course or getting your medal or anything like that. So it was really nice to be able to do that, and like, to be able to share it like with them as well.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And yeah, definitely not stopping for selfies on a PB run.
No.
So, and you mentioned earlier that ahead of Valencia, you were feeling quite unconfident in yourself. And, after a great experience in New York, you'd got a marathon under your belt already, a pretty quick one as well. Why do you think that was that you felt that way?
So it's such a difficult one, and I think that, in the world of like running, at the moment there's so much online, and it's so easy to just kind of like, you know, I think because I've ran 2:29, and I was very aware that when I ran 2:29, I was 22, I was still at uni, like all these things, then just that kind of like not knowing whether you're ever going to get back to sort of like that level. The 2:35 in London, great, but like I want to be really, really good. And just that doubt, to be honest, like it wasn't like I'd had a bad marathon block. I'd done some good sessions. I think a large part of it was that I hadn't done large chunks of marathon pace in one go. So, for instance, it was a lot of like 4x5K and things like that. So, I just don't think I had that confidence of like holding marathon pace for the marathon. So yeah, I would say that that's probably why I was kind of like most nervous. And, like I say to all the athletes that I coach, sometimes you've just got to trust the process. You can't run a marathon at marathon pace before the marathon, which, and it's not even like you can do, if you're training for a 5K, you can do 5 by 1K at goal pace, but you can't do 26 by a mile at marathon pace, so it is a really funny one where you just kind of have to trust in your body that like it is going to be able to perform on race day and you are going to be able to hold that pace. But I think that, yeah, I just didn't have that like real self-confidence going into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's extremely valid. I think anyone would be kind of having some doubts, for a distance that long. So it's good to know that even at the top, these same thoughts are kind of going through your head. And yeah, so you mentioned kind of that fear of, oh, will I be back there? What if I peak then? I think that's such a common kind of fear that so many runners have, especially looking back at past experiences, everything's written down. Where do you think that comes from? The kind of constant, oh, maybe I won't, maybe I will.
Oh, it is such a difficult one, isn't it? And I think that, like some people are like really, really confident in their own ability. And like, I know that I'm definitely someone where like I do doubt myself. Like, I'd like to say that I've got a lot of like, like guts and like courage, but I still do have quite a lot of self-doubt. Um, I don't know where it comes from. I reckon probably from, like always being just that kind of like classic, eh, back in school, if you got 95%, it wasn't good enough, you know. Do you know what I mean? So just always feeling like you're not quite doing enough, or like you're not quite good enough. Not in terms of like training volume, but just kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, and I reckon I'll probably always be that way, but equally I don't think I would change it for the world in the sense of like um, striving for more, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it kind of comes back to the idea that, you have high highs, there's kind of low lows, or if you want extreme success, it comes at some kind of cost. You have to have the drive, you have to kind of always be searching for more because otherwise you just stop. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly that.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And I guess then as well, kind of thinking maybe more holistically, across the year, across 2024, what do you think for you's kind of been the most valuable thing that you've done for your running?
Mm. Oh gosh, that's such a difficult one. Um, oh gosh, I'd say, hmm, I don't know. I would say that like probably making the most of like experiences that are connected to running, but aren't necessarily performance. Because I think that then drives you to still have the performances. Like, so for instance, like, I'm not paid to run. It's not my, like, running's my job, but like me running isn't my job. So therefore I've still got to enjoy it. So for instance, like I went to Paris with Puma, and that was an amazing experience that was connected to running, but it wasn't like, like I wasn't performing at the Olympics. Do you know what I mean? That was an amazing experience. I went to Cape Town earlier in the year, and that was just an amazing experience to be able to kind of like run in a different location. I think that things like that has been, really, really valuable. Is that like it's really important to kind of remember that like you can have serious performance goals, but you can also still do things that are enjoyable
Yeah.
within that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely that makes a lot of sense and kind of sounds like focusing kind of on the process and the journey and taking some of the, I guess, reward factor off the destination or the end point and
Yeah.
keeping it on kind of the present and the now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think having those days where like you sort of like, if it's a big session day, a big marathon session day, it's no nonsense. Like that's when like I switch on type of thing. But then equally having, days or events where you can use your running as something that is a hobby, is really important as well, to have those days where you can use it as like a switch off type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's great that you kind of highlight there that running is technically it is a hobby for you, despite kind of the elite status that you're running at, it is a hobby. You have got a full-time job on the side. How do you find then that obviously, you coach marathon running as well, in particular, as an elite successful marathon runner yourself, how do you feel that kind of helps you as a coach? And then vice versa, do you feel that coaching's helped you as an athlete?
Yeah, I do. I think it's one of those things where, being able to kind of like read other athletes and, I'd like to think the way that I do my coaching is very sort of like it's like stats are important, but how someone feels is also like really, really important, especially before races and before big races. And I think that, yeah, that has definitely helped. And, a lot of things around like mindset and like motivation and, I think has definitely been really beneficial. I can put a lot of my own experience like into my coaching, but then also, the athletes that I coach, like I gain a lot from them in terms of like their feedback and just, understanding how, different people operate. And I think that, yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, no, that's so good to hear. And yeah, it also, in terms of, I guess, maybe the future or moving forwards, would you ever look to or want to become just a full-time athlete? Or is it always kind of the plan to keep coaching or another occupation on the side or as the main?
Do you know what? I get so much like from coaching in the sense of like when someone achieves their goal, it is so rewarding that I would love for that to be part of my life for a really, really long time. So yeah, I can't ever see myself doing just my own running, just simply because like I it would be amazing to have the support of a brand. Of course it would, to be able to take some of the load off and, even just things in terms of like, kit, shoes, organization for races, getting entered into races, all things like that would be amazing to have the support of a brand. But, being able to coach and help and mentor other athletes is something that I do find really, really rewarding, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And even the same with like the content that I create on Instagram, like I do not do a lot of branded content. A lot of my content is, out and out sort of like running advice, no nonsense running advice. And I'm kind of putting it out there in the hope that, it helps someone. That person's probably someone that, I'm never going to meet. But then when you do kind of like get a message, or I do bump into someone in person and they say, oh, you wrote this and I did this and it really, really helped. Like that is so rewarding. And I wouldn't ever want to stop doing that because like running's fab. And I think that, the more kind of like, information and, kind of like knowledge you can share and even just like useful tips. And if it's like been your struggles, maybe someone else is struggling with the same thing, but they just haven't, heard anyone say that they're struggling with it is really, really valuable.
Yeah, well, you can take value or take happiness in knowing that you are, having a positive impact on people. And yeah, when you've got the knowledge, it is really great to share it and help other people out. And maybe sometime in the future there's room for a sort of middle ground situation.
Yeah, yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, and then I guess in terms of kind of, the past year or how things have gone, you spoke previously about how you got your period a bit later on in life. How have you found, or, what's your current approach sort of managing that? Because, when we're talking marathons, we're talking long chunks of running. You may not be able to just do one tampon or, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think a really, really important part of it is working with your body rather than trying to like work against it. So, every athlete is different. And, for me, like one cycle to a different cycle might actually be quite different as well. Largely the trend does seem to be like external stresses rather than anything to do with like my training or my training volume, which I think is really interesting. And every single female is so different type of thing, so I can only speak from my own experiences, but I definitely think that working with your body, if you've got a massive marathon session the next day and you're really not feeling great, the best thing to do is to probably push it, like one day later, for instance. But I know that on the other hand, if it's sort of like a shorter session, I might not feel great. I might not feel like I want to step out the door to do it. But actually, sometimes just getting on with it is the best possible thing that you can do. Because if it does so happen that a big race lands on, day one or day two of your cycle, like I would always like to think that I would still give it my absolute best go and just see what happens. I think that writing yourself off from something, we know that there's been so many famous stories of, like amazing performances of female athletes, at all points of their cycle. So I think it's really important to sort of like not write yourself off just because, you're like, oh, it's day one, oh, it's day two, or whatever type of thing. So I think sort of like a bit of both. Some days, moving things around in the week might just simply be the best thing to do. Other days you might not feel fab, but you just kind of have to like, get on with it and, learn how to manage it better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, the evidence speaks for itself. There really are, examples of people doing well or having their best performances at all points on the cycle. So, with enough mindset, hopefully it is something that can just be powered through. And in terms of, I guess as well, like period products or sanitary products, what's sort of your go-to for a longer run or a longer session?
So I would say that like for obviously every athlete is so different. When I'm actually like physically running, like my period is always like a lot lighter, like when
Mm.
I'm actually doing the run type of thing. So I think that, I usually use those really, really light pads. And then I think like if you just wear like black shorts, then you're pretty much, always okay type of thing. Yeah, that's essentially, what I do. Like I say, if you had a heavier flow, I think that things like the period pants, I know that there's like specific, I'm pretty sure that like Modi Body and Puma have done a collab previously. I think that that's like a really good option just for kind of like peace of mind. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, no, definitely. There are some great stuff on the market, yeah, especially Modi Body in particular do some good products. But yeah, failing everything, pair of black shorts, no one's gonna notice. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's probably not gonna go drip down your legs. So
Yeah.
covered on all fronts there. And then I guess the other thing is in terms of, you being someone who, a long time ago now did struggle with an eating disorder. How do you kind of, or how have you sort of managed to now maintain a healthy relationship and move on with your life?
For sure. So I think that, just kind of like knowing that if you want to kind of train well and perform well, and for me, a big part of it isn't even just related to my running, but it's actually just, like I have to be like switched on, pretty much every hour of the day, apart from when I'm asleep. So if I'm not fueling myself well, then my health will go downhill and I won't be able to be as, effective in, my training or my work type of thing. So I just kind of see it as that really, I try and kind of, be smart with decisions around, what I'm eating and when, in terms of like when I'm running, just trying to make like, wise choices in terms of like plenty of protein, loads of carbs. But like I think that can speak on behalf of any marathon runner. And I always have quite high volume, all of the time, is that like I'm always hungry, like I'm always ready to eat something type of thing. So it's not sort of hard for me to like eat enough. So yeah, but I think it's just about kind of not deeping it too much, making smart choices, eating well for your training, but like don't like massively overthink it. Like it's not, I think that there's so much out there, you see so much online of all these specific things and everyone's so unique. Eat what you like, eat what works for you, eat what makes you feel good when you're running, what's gonna, fuel your body to be able to recover well, but just also be able to like operate effectively like as a human being outside of running.
Yeah, definitely. Some really sound advice there for sure. And the same again with sort of periods and stuff like that. Your body is so unique. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
great that you just highlight there the importance of kind of just, listening to your body,
Yeah.
blocking out the noise from around and focusing on what you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. Like if something works for you, it might not work for somebody else, but if it works for you, then like stick with it, Like stick with it.
Yeah, no, awesome, awesome to hear. And let's talk about your training then. What's a typical week look like for, 42 kilometers?
Okay, so in So I've just started with a new coach, so this will be like a very kind of like, slightly different approach, but I think I can speak on behalf of, all, kind of like that those the top marathon runners is that, you're going to be having high volume per week. In peak marathon training, it probably sits at about 150k a week to 160. So we're talking like 90-ish miles, somewhere around there. Of course, like I say, every athlete's different. Some athletes will cross train and therefore will do less easy volume. I'm not very good at cross training. Like I'm not very good at swimming. Like just like if I'm sat on a spin bike, like my heart rate is probably at like 70 beats per minute. So it's not very effective. So I do like my volume as running type of thing. There isn't additional cross training on that. And in there you're gonna have a lot of like easy volume or easy to steady volume. A lot of the running that I do, I'd say, is probably more like steady running rather than like super easy recovery. There'll be some double days in there. You'll probably have one session per week that's kind of like your shorter intervals, whether it's, mile reps, 2k reps, maybe a bit of track work. You're going to have like one larger session that's going to be like your marathon session, and then one longish run. Every coach sort of kind of works differently, and different things work for different athletes. I can speak from both like a coach perspective myself and an athlete perspective. But yeah, essentially it's a lot of running. Some of it's at marathon pace, some of it's a little bit quicker, some of it's slower. But I think a big part of it is, to be able to hold that pace and effort in that final 10k. Your body just needs to be like conditioned to run a fair amount.
Yeah, for sure. 90 miles is no joke. I mean, logistically, how do you fit that in? How do you structure that in your day?
Yeah, for sure. So I often kind of like, especially for my easy days, just do kind of like one run in the morning, one run in the evening with like my work kind of like in between type of thing. So I'd say that's pretty standard. And then for session days, once again I'll kind of like session in the morning, maybe do a double. So it does just sort of like pan out. When you are doing those big marathon sessions, you're covering quite a lot of volume in one morning type of thing. You might be, you're likely going upwards of 30k, so that sort of like ticks off quite quite a big chunk just like there and then type of thing. So yeah, it sounds a lot, but once you're into the rhythm of it, it just sort of kind of like pieces together. But I never set myself weekly targets for volume. The weekly volume is an outcome of the effective training, and I think that that's something that's so important, because there's no point chasing a number of miles if you're doing like an 8k warm down at like a really really slow pace. Because like what benefits that going to do? Like I mean, it's, like, yes, it is running, but like, is it effective, is it structured? So I think that it's really important to kind of think that, there's going to be some, athletes who operate off a lower mileage for whatever reason. It could be, injury history, it could simply be timings with, work, family. But as long as it's effective for what they're doing, that's the most important part, rather than that number at the end of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really sound advice there. Definitely it's so important to focus on, yeah, that process really, and definitely not to chase numbers for no reason, be smart with the training. And you also talk about sort of having a new coach. Do you want to talk us through, how that's come about, and how you found that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's one of those things where, so back in 2017, when I've spoken about previously and spoken about on a lot of different podcasts, I went to see, my local physio back at home, Chris Lecker, and he was, the person that it definitely sort of changed my life. I owe an awful lot to him, in the sense of that I wouldn't be where I am now, not just in my running, but just, where I am, like in life, if it wasn't for that real kind of like pivotal point. So yeah, so that was back in 2017, and he handed me over to, one of the local coaches at City of Hull Athletics Club. He wasn't coaching himself at the time, was working, as physio and rehab. But it was always kind of like one of those things where, in the back of my mind, I always knew, and in the back of his mind, I think he always knew, that at some point there was going to be the coach athlete relationship between the two of us. It was just a case of, when that might be. And then, through circumstance, then I went to St Mary's University, worked with, Mick Woods, the St Mary's coach, and then, worked with Jeff, who had, a group of athletes who were also based in Teddington, and then worked with Gav. And that was very much, like my, the comeback to the marathon type of thing. And, the help through, Gav and Joe really got me back to being able to run marathons, healthily. But it was always that kind of thing of like, I knew at some point I would like to be coached by Chris, just because, not just his knowledge, but we really get along like as people. And I think you need that sort of like back and forth and honesty between, a coach and an athlete. And I can see a lot of myself in him. So yeah, it just kind of came to the point where, like, towards the end of last year, I was like, right, I want to make this change. This feels like the right time to kind of, move on to be coached by Chris, and spoke to him, and he said, yeah, type of thing. So yeah, which is really nice. And of course, Chris is based back at home in East Yorkshire, has the group East Yorkshire Roadrunners, and it also means that, whereas for a very, very long time I've had, like long distance, like coach athlete relationships type of thing, that I actually will be able to see Chris in person. Not all the time, not for every session, not for every week, but once a month, for some of those key things, I will be able to go back and do those sessions and have that like in person feedback and communication. And I think that that's, going to be really, really valuable for me. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds so exciting. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And clearly this sounds like it's an effective coach athlete relationship. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of factors that contribute to that. And I suppose as well, kind of around that situation, you are a qualified coach yourself. You choose to have someone else kind of coach you. What's the reasoning behind that?
I think it's really, really important to have somebody else say, how did that feel? Because you can look at the stats yourself. You can be given a session, you can do the session, you can be like, right, okay, I've done 8 by a K at 320. But if you don't have, somebody, I know there are, people who are self-coached. For me, I don't think I could do it. I need someone else to ask me, like, Becky, how did that feel? And then for me to be like, right, now I need to think about it and say, actually, it felt like I was going all out from the very beginning. I felt absolutely awful. Or be like, do you know what? I felt really comfortable. I felt like I was in a proper flow state. Felt, and I think it's really important to have that bounce back of feedback, and also to have someone to say, this is what I want you to do. And it's to be okay for you to be able to question it, or to say like, oh, I'm not sure, but to have somebody else be like, this is what I want you to do, and someone to look from like an outside perspective. Because sometimes you'll be doing something yourself and it might just take someone else to notice something, or to be like, actually, let's try this, that you might have not thought of or not had the confidence to just do yourself, that can be like the make or break of it, really. And I've seen that, with athletes that I coach as well, that it's really important to sometimes say like, yeah, that might have been the stats from that session, but like, how did it feel? Like, and I think that's really, really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting you say that. I mean, of course, two pairs of eyes is better than one. It's always great to get multiple perspectives, multiple angles, because, as a single person, you can't see everything always. We've all got our own angles. But I was listening to a podcast the other day, actually, I can't remember the name, unfortunately, but it was some sort of psychology expert. And they were sort of saying that when you say stuff out loud, it switches systems, and it fully kind of you can actually start to process something once it's spoken out loud. So I think that yeah makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think that, whether it's through like a voice note, whether it's through a message, whatever it is, but just actually being able to not just do the session, but to be able to kind of like process it, it's really, really beneficial. And that's where the sort of like the learning takes place, because that's what running is really, isn't it? Like, you're learning more about your body, you're learning about what works for you. But if you just sort of kind of like do something and then that's it, then how does that process sort of like get effective. Like I don't know whether it really does type of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. No, and in terms of, I guess, for you then, what have you found to be the most effective thing, training wise? What do you respond really well to?
Oh, I would say those large volume marathon sessions are really important. I think that in the past I've done a lot of like reps and floats work. I'm talking like in my, kind of like PB marathon block that I did with Jeff. We did a lot of reps and floats work, and I think that that was really effective. I'd say that probably speak on behalf of anyone when they see like a reps and float session, you think, oh my God, because you don't get that like recovery because it's sort of like a constant effort, or you're constantly sort of having to be switched on mentally. But I think especially for the marathon, that's actually really important because it's not 8 by 5k, it's like 42k straight through type of thing. So yeah, I would say that like reps and floats and those big sessions are effective.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, especially for something like the marathon, I'd imagine. And what's your favorite session?
Well, I would say that like favorite session probably isn't the most effective session. Like, something like 10 by 1k is lovely, is really nice. I like a session like that, but probably not like the most effective. Definitely has an important place in the marathon, don't get me wrong. But yeah, something like that is always quite nice to do.
Yeah, I mean, 10 by 1K is still quite a lot of 1Ks, but yeah, comparatively, I can see that being the kind of the speed session.
Yeah.
And I guess as well for you then, are you fully locked in for the marathon for the foreseeable? Or do you ever have any kind of temptation to drop down or trial anything else?
So I don't have a love for racing on the track. I think that I can quite clearly say that. And I think it's one of those things where it's really important to think that, like, there might be some, kind of coaches out there that'd be like, no, I want you to race on the track, to get quick or anything. But ultimately, like I've said before, like, this is something that, like, I want to enjoy my running and I want to be excited about it. And the thought of racing on the track does simply doesn't excite me. Yes, I will use shorter distance races to progress my running and to progress in the marathon, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons type of thing. But I think it's quite clear that if I'm the most successful place for me to be in my running is is the marathon, and that is what excites me. Like, I can't begin to explain how special that like last 100 meters does feel, and I think because they are quite few and far between makes them even more special. But yeah, like I say, I'll use shorter distance races to progress the marathon, and I'm fully aware that some of my PBs now are very old, like they need to be rewritten, and that is definitely something that I want to do, but it will all sort of be with the kind of onlookers to improving that long-term marathon, because I'm fully aware that you can't run 5:20 pace for a marathon if you can't run 5:20 pace for a half marathon.
Yeah, yeah. Or if you could, that would be incredibly impressive. And I guess then as well for you also, you go on these really long runs quite frequently. You've got a lot of training, you've got a lot of miles. What do you typically think about?
So I used to be someone who would never ever listen to music when I was
Oh,
running.
one of them.
So I used to just never ever listen to music. And then I started listening to music, and when I'm doing the big marathon sessions, if it's anything at marathon pace, I'm not listening to music. I'm just sort of like thinking about being in the kilometer that I'm in. You're sort of in that state of like, I can't really process that many thoughts, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure I'm thinking that's quite common. You can't think about too much when you're really focusing on those sorts of sessions. But on those like longer, steadier runs or like a lot of volume, like I'll just listen to music. And I do have it sort of like so loud that like I can't think about anything else, because that is my switch off time. Because the rest of my hours in the day pretty much are spent thinking about other people's running. So when I'm running, I sort of want to block out any other thoughts. I'll either, if I'm running with a friend, then that's amazing, run with a friend. But if I'm running on my own, then yeah, I'll just be listening to music and just enjoying it. Like I said previously, like like running is sort of like go dance, put the music in, switch off. I love running around Battersea Park because I don't have to think about anything at all. It's like being on a treadmill but being outdoors, which is amazing. So yeah, it really is just that sort of like block off any thoughts time, just enjoy not thinking about anything for a little while.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes running can be such a nice time to just kind of get away from everything, be in your head, just have a bit of space from life. And have you thought about going for sort of the world record for laps around Battersea? Because you're probably getting quite close.
So I am doing a lap count this year. So
Okay.
I thought, you know what, like I'm really intrigued to see how many laps of Battersea I do cover, in 2025. So yeah, but like my rules are that it can't be half laps and I can't specifically like alter a run to make it laps of Battersea.
Right.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So, like, for instance, yesterday, like, I could have ran 21K around Battersea and clocked loads of laps, but I actually didn't. I went to Hyde Park, you know? So there, but obviously, this is completely pointless, and it's just for me to see how many laps I end up doing at the end of the year. But I am quite intrigued, so.
Well, I mean, there's true integrity going into this, so whatever comes out, you can feel really good about it.
Exactly.
Um, and then yeah, 2026, we'll have to have this conversation again and
Yeah,
find out how many you made.
exactly.
What have you got any estimates so far, and also how much is one lap?
One lap is 2.75K. It's such a difficult one because, like, I'm really not sure. I've tried to think about it and have a guess, but I reckon it'll be quite a lot. I think I've done maybe 11 this week, and that's from like Wednesday. So
Right.
do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's going to be quite a lot. Like it's going to be quite a lot by the end of the year. So yeah,
Yeah, well, exciting stuff to come. And yeah, I guess we're kind of coming to the end of our time. So, a couple of sort of quick fire questions to close out with. Well,
that.
this one's pretty big actually, but what motivates you?
Oh, I would say like the excitement of the unknown, just
Oh,
not quite knowing how far you can go with anything that you do in life. It's not written yet, so I think that's quite motivating.
I like that. That's a new one. I like it. Good stuff. Okay. And a meme or reel or something that you read, maybe a quote, anything like that that resonated with you most recently.
Oh, do you know what? It was actually it was it was actually a meme from so Hercules has just recently ran around Cyprus, which was like a huge distance to cover, and it was actually something that he posted, and it was like me trying to convince myself that a Morton gel is like a nice like sweet treat or tasty snack type of thing, and it was that. But saying that, I don't mind the taste of Morton. I quite like it, but yeah, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I can imagine actually, yeah, taking on gels all the time, you must, yeah, start to get a little bit bored of the taste.
Yeah.
Yeah, life on the liquid edge, I guess,
Yeah.
everything for performance. And what is your favorite post-run snack?
Oh, probably something like banana bread. Yeah, flat white and banana bread from District, which is literally just on the corner of Battersea Park. That's my favourite post run thing.
Oh, nice. Yeah, banana cake's definitely the best cake out there, for sure,
Yeah.
100%. And if you didn't run and you didn't work within running, what do you think you'd do, or like what area would you be in?
Oh, that's such a difficult one. I don't know. I'd quite like to get really good at like reformer Pilates. I think that would be really fun. Maybe do like yeah, go into like more that side of things. Like definitely still like in the health and wellness space because like I think, like moving your body and, feeling good is so important. But yeah, probably more on the side of like reformer Pilates or like yoga. I think that would be really fun.
Well, nice. I mean, if you ever feel like you've hit your spot with the marathons, then
Yeah,
that's your next place to go. And
exactly.
and then looking into 2025, nearly said 2026 there actually. What is the kind of goal, if there is one, or kind of a few things that you're hoping to get from the year?
So I would like to end the year like knowing that I have made a step forwards in my running performance. Yeah. I'm not going to say like, I want to run this time in this event, because I think that, like the year sort of like shapes itself, and you can't like predict the future, and you can't predict what's gonna happen. But I would like to just kind of end it and think like I've made a step forwards from where I was this time last year, which I definitely felt like at the end of 2024, from the end of 2023. So yeah, I think just kind of like making that step forwards, and that's not always defined by a specific time as such. Like, yeah, it sort of is, but like it doesn't exactly have to be. It's more of like that feeling.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's beautiful. I think that's so great that you bring that up there, because it is so important sometimes to just, yeah, not put pressure on a specific thing. You don't know what's going to happen. And I think that just speaks to kind of the I guess level of mindset you've got, which is obviously required to do events like the marathon. And yeah, I think that's a great one there. Okay, well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to kind of catch back up with you, and it's good to see that everything's kind of moving along in a good direction, and everything's going well overall. So, yeah, wish you the best for the upcoming year, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolute pleasure. So, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This really helps to get the content out there. And I want to make this podcast the best possible for you. So go follow Fitter, Faster, Happier on Instagram. That's Fitter, Faster, Happier, to leave your questions, comments, and feedback, and for updates and guest requests. All the best for the week ahead, guys. Run happy, live happy, be happy.